Hey everybody, Jonathan Bailor back with an extra special SANE show. I am so excited and delighted to be bringing you Congressman Tim Ryan, who is blowing up right now.
Jeez.
As you can imagine, getting the congressman here on the show is a wonderful treat. So, Congressman Tim Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I get about three faxes a week, and it happened to be right now where I'm getting a fax.
Well, I know you're
Thanks.
in
Thanks for having me. This is very exciting.
Well, I know you're in high demand, so I can't imagine that faxes, texts, podcasts, vodcasts, it's all happening for you right now.
Yeah, we'll get through it.
All right, well, Congressman Ryan, for folks who aren't as familiar with how you got to become a congressman from your rather humble beginnings, can you take us on that journey with you?
Yeah, grew up, just kind of an average guy in Northeast Ohio, played football, played basketball, went to Catholic high school, and graduated, went to college in Bowling Green, which is in Northwest Ohio. Played a little bit of college football before that, and then kind of caught the political bug when I went to law school, and worked on a campaign, worked in Washington D.C., and then came back to an old Rust Belt town really, and wanted to be involved, wanted to be a leader. I'd been a leader my whole life as a quarterback and playing sports, and just wanted to take some kind of leadership role in helping to rebuild the community. So I said, screw it, I'll run for political office, and ran for the state senate when I was 26 years old, and won in it's a Democratic area, and really the Democratic primary is the election, and won in a 7-8 person Democratic primary. The very next year, I ran for Congress, and same kind of scenario, except I had to run against a sitting congressman and another congressman who was in prison. That's a whole other story. But and we won, and got into Congress in 2003 and had been there ever since. But really, my main goal was how could I help my area, this old kind of mill town. How do we get into technology? How do we figure out how to diversify our economy? How do we get our downtowns hopping, quality of life, the arts, like make it a good place for young people to come back? And fortunately, the people wanted to change, put me in, and have kept me in ever since.
Well, Congressman Ryan, I share your Buckeye heritage. I'm from Columbus, Ohio originally, so I know the term brain drain is very familiar to me. I went to school in Greencastle, Indiana, a small liberal arts university known as DePaul University, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And so what did you see as the biggest problems with regards to, obviously there's political and economic, but let's say in terms of just people and wellness and well-being, that you hoped your political influence may change?
Well, we had, corruption issues, and as you mentioned, the economy collapsed. We were all into the steel industry, but I think a lot of it was attitude. We had an attitude that was based on the past. We kept asking and wondering, when are the steel mills going to come back? And so we were locked into that, because those in many ways were the good old days. Middle class incomes were very high. You could send your kids to college. You could go on a family vacation. So they wanted that back. And I think part of what I brought was, hey, we have to change. I mean, we've got to, for our own survival. If we do want young kids to have an opportunity to come back, we do have to change. And I think changing the attitudes of people, even when we started to have successes, people couldn't believe that it was actually happening in Youngstown, Ohio. Like, that can't be happening here. So it took years and years of accomplishments for people. But to me, it was, how do you change your attitude that you can do great things? Yes, the people I would talk to, I'd go to high schools and talk to kids and give them a pep talk. You can come back here. There's opportunities here. You can do whatever you want. And we've got to get through this kind of mental block that we had about how people do have the ability to thrive with the proper attitude.
And what have you found? Obviously, working in the political arena, there are many macro level levers you can pull and push. But at that micro level, when you're speaking at high schools and colleges and out speaking with individuals who may have had the rug pulled out from underneath them, let's say, what do you find to be the biggest mental and attitudinal challenges they face and possible solutions?
Well, I think in essence, they don't believe they can be who they really are. They believe that they have to do the traditional route. And I think that mold has been broken. I mean, just the fact that we're doing, podcasts and videocasts and all of this is like, there is no mold anymore. And I think for us to communicate as leaders to young people, you can break out of this mold that supposedly people are trying to lock you into, and they feel like they got to go down this road. They don't have to. And once they tap into, and I try to turn kids inward to look inside. What do you want to do? What drives you? What's your passion? What are you enthusiastic about? What do you like to read about? What makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up? What do you want to do all the time? That's your route. It's easy once you turn inward and see. And so I feel like my job is to kind of get them from looking outward to, turning the lens inward. And that's where all the juice is. I mean, that's where all the enthusiasm is for life.
Congressman Ryan, I know that really resonates with me and will really resonate with our audience, because we see so often that people are looking, especially in the area of wellness, well-being, physical, psychological, spiritual, whichever one, they look outside themselves. Is this good or bad? Is this, should I eat this or not? And they eat it and it makes them feel terrible. And they're like, well, now I'm confused. Well, looking inward, it really solves that problem for you. It's a bit like, how's that working out for you? But in a culture where we so often, we look for experts, we look outside of ourselves. How have you, and you're someone that people do look to, so that I'm sure people say, Congressman Ryan, what should we do? What is the right answer? How do you turn that around?
I'm a big Joseph Campbell fan, and he really shaped a lot of my worldviews coming out of college and all the rest. And he had this great expression where he said, people think they're looking for the meaning of life or meaning for life. And what they're really looking for is the experience of life, to actually feel life and be in your own body, in your own life. And I think, ultimately, that's the challenge, is how do you turn the lens inward? And I think you've got to take time. I wrote a book called A Mindful Nation, which is about a mindful meditation practice. I think you've got to find some technique, some tool for contemplation, to look inward, to know what's coming up inside of you. What are your biases? What's hurt you over the years that are driving certain behaviors? What are you really in? You've got to take time. You got to shut all the technology off. Not now, while you're listening to this and watching this, but some other point. Take some time each day to reflect on who you really are, what you're really jacked up about, and that will then drive you and lead you into your own life.
Well, Tim, you're a great example of this, because I can only imagine that you have multiple electronic devices. You need to be in this place, that place, on this. You were just on 60 Minutes. I mean, you're living the life of a national figurehead. So how do you personally make time to consciously live your life and look inward?
Well, I have a new baby that's 6 months old, and he did not get the memo on my meditation practice. So it's been a little rocky in the last 6 months, but realistically, you try to just find points throughout the day to just stop, breathe, see what's coming up, and identify it. And from a public policy standpoint, which I think really was your last question, what do we do? The government doesn't have all the answers. The government can't make you be contemplative, nor should it. But I do think what we need to start teaching and the investments we need to make should all say, how do we raise energy levels? How do we make sure that people are participating at the ultimate level? How do they reach their full potential? And I think it starts with the food you're eating, the habits we're developing in our young kids. And I really think it's about getting back to the fundamentals. People think that, in Washington especially, that if we have this complicated problem, we need to come up with a more complicated solution just to solve the complicated problem. And the reality of it is that we need to get back to the fundamentals. And that's why I think in our schools, in our colleges, we need to start teaching kids how to pay attention, And I think like these different kind of techniques like mindfulness are, instead of yelling at the kid to pay attention, this is the teaching them how. This is the how of paying attention, how to cultivate their awareness. In the military, and the Marines are starting to do mindfulness-based mental fitness training. They call it situational awareness. So you're aware of what the situation is around you, but you also got to know what the situation is inside of you. So how do we teach our kids how to be aware, how to pay attention, how to listen deeply to somebody else, work in teams, all of those things. And then the food piece. I mean, we fill our schools up with pop, which we call it pop in Ohio. Everyone else seems to call it soda. I went on the book tour and I kept saying pop, and everyone said, you can't say pop. No one knows what you're talking about. You got to say soda. I said, we say pop in Ohio. So, we fill the kids up with pop, a fruit roll up, and a bag of Doritos. That's for breakfast. And then we sit them down and say, hey, you got to learn algebra now. And we can't figure out why we're 30th in the world in math, or 24th in science. Well, we fill our kids up with junk. It makes them lethargic. They can't concentrate. It hampers brain function. So from a public policy, what can we do? I think we start teaching these things. There should be a garden in every school. There should be a kitchen in every schoolhouse. There should be a salad bar in every school cafeteria. Teach kids how to eat. Build gardens in these urban neighborhoods where there are food deserts. Knock down these dilapidated homes and put up gardens where kids can work in the summer, create some economic activity, produce good food, and start teaching these habits. And I will tell you, the government can't micromanage our economy, but if we have healthy young kids with focus, resiliency, and high energy levels because they're on a proper diet, the rest will take care of itself.
It's a fabulous point to tie those implementation strategies back to your point of getting back to basics, where just the idea of cooking and eating, we tend to think that that's almost maybe analogous to breathing and that people can just figure it out. But as we're seeing, no, people can't just figure it out. You're not just born knowing how to cook or knowing how to navigate your grocery store, especially in the modern food environment. So do you see hope on the horizon for stemming this obesity epidemic, starting with our children, or are we fighting against corporate interests, which are insurmountable?
Those are the best fights to have. I write in my book, the old Irish saying, is this a private fight or can anyone get into it? So I think, we're going to have a big grassroots movement. We're going to have the fight. And you made a heck of a point, because those things about eating and family dinners and all, those were always taught from generation to generation. I grew up, I'm half Italian. So we had pasta on Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday was pasta fazool. My grandmother, I could tell what was going to be for dinner by what she picked out of the garden.
Wow.
That used to be taught from generation to generation, and it's not anymore. Those links have been broken due to fast food, and hectic two people have to work to make ends meet in the family. So I do have hope, because when I travel the country, I see in pockets across the country and across Ohio, urban gardens, farmers markets, more people aware, especially moms in suburban Columbus, Ohio, or suburban Cincinnati, Ohio, and Delaware County that are concerned about what their kids are eating. And and I think this crosses political lines too, because how do we balance our budget as a country, which is traditionally would be identified as a Republican viewpoint, which I don't agree that it's just them. I think everybody's concerned. But how do we do that if the top two drivers of our budget are Medicare and Medicaid, our healthcare programs? Mm-hmm. If we don't make sure that we curb the costs on those, we're never going to have money to invest in roads, bridges, education, research and development, additive manufacturing, the maker movement, all of these things that are really important for us to invest in, because we won't have the dough to do it. And in the next 5 years, half the country is going to either have diabetes or pre-diabetes. Now, good luck trying to balance the budget or drive down costs in Medicare and Medicaid if half the country, 1 in 4 teenagers, will have diabetes or pre-diabetes. So we need this grassroots movement. And I am optimistic, because I think politics 2.0 is about getting back to the fundamentals. Mm. It really is. It's about making sure that the folks who are into the contemplative attention awareness practices in our schools they're allies with the people who want good food in the schools. They don't necessarily know that yet, but you start adding these groups together, the maker movement, the people who are into like having 3D printers in schools. These are all people who are thinking about new ways of educating our kids, getting back to the fundamentals. Think about it: attention, awareness, healthy food, and making things like a home economics and a shop class 2.0. That's getting back to the basics. That's politics 2.0. And I think this is what people want. And I feel like my job is, and your job is, how do we connect the dots for folks to say, hey, we're all on the same page. We all want the same thing. We're allies. Let's learn about what each other, what we're doing, and then how do we build this new coalition that will shift the politics and give you the power and the votes to take on those corporate interests.
Very much resonates with me, Congressman Ryan. That was eloquently put. And I hear the passion in your voice and the excitement in your voice. But what's got you most passionate and most excited right now? And what's next for you?
Well, you mentioned the 60 Minutes piece. I mean, the fact that 60 Minutes did a very in-depth story on mindfulness meditation, for example. And I'm getting texts from people who I know, hey, great, how can I learn about that? They hear about the food issue. Great. How can I learn about that? That's where that's why I'm so excited, is because I think, and I know there are people out there that are really excited about building this movement. And I saw it with the Mindful Nation, which was my book about mindfulness meditation, and my new book on the real food revolution, healthy eating, green groceries, and the return of the American family farm. Those two things I feel like are building blocks. They're like the cornerstones to politics 2.0. Mm-hmm. And I don't know where this leads me politically, but I do get excited about, potentially doing more to help build this movement out, because I just know if someone steps up and says there is a politics 2.0, there is a new way to do this, here's what I think, and these two books are an opportunity to help connect the dots, I think people will gravitate to that. And whether it's me or somebody else, I'm in the fight, and very excited about the word getting out, and guys like you being interested in this, because I think your audience is going to hopefully see this and say, what do I do? I'll give you one example. My book was laying on a coffee table of a friend of mine. He had his girlfriend over. She picks up the book. She says, what's this? She said, what? He said, well, my friend wrote this book. She's a school teacher. A week later, she's talked her school into putting a garden in the school.
Yeah.
It's just like that. It's just, I think it's about getting and connecting the dots and gaining awareness. And that's why I get excited. That's what it's all about. And so Brady, my 6-month-old son, and my 12-year-old son, and my 11-year-old daughter, hopefully we can do this in time to reshape, the world to make it a little better place for them.
Congressman Ryan, I think you're very much ahead of the curve, because, as you said, this is a huge issue for the country with the diabetes statistics you mentioned, and also knowing that now the economic burden of just diabetes, not obesity, just diabetes on this country is $50 billion greater than the economic burden of all tobacco. We know how much we've done to protect our citizens from tobacco if they don't want to participate in that lifestyle. It seems like sooner rather than later, the diabetes, obesity, these things are going to be undeniable. They're not. It's not about just try harder. It's like, look, our country cannot survive unless we find solutions to this. So it's very encouraging to see someone who is in Washington who is already making those connections, because as a let's say a newer generation on this planet, when I think about things that I am petrified of for my children and the following generations, is just, look, like you said, America cannot exist if every single one of its citizens are diabetic.
Right.
So what do we do about that, right? And I
Right.
appreciate all that you're doing. So where can folks go to learn more about you, your new books, everything you got going on?
Obviously on Amazon.com, you can go and check those books out on The Real Food Revolution and A Mindful Nation. And as I said, those are the two cornerstones. And then obviously, I have Tim Ryan for Congress is my political webpage if anybody's interested in seeing what we're doing politically. So those are kind of that's how you get a hold of me. but in both of the books, and I really tried to make it a point, at the end of the chapters where we talk about what we need to do, there are examples, there's a resource section. So if you're interested in getting mindfulness in schools, you can go to the back of the book in the resource section and see the programs that are out there that you could potentially implement. So we try to facilitate. If you're into urban gardening or gardens in the schools, we try to direct you to where you can go. Really, I wanted both of these to be almost like a field manual for moms and dads who, want to start making some moves in their own communities, you got to start where you are. Whatever you're enthusiastic about. If there's veterans with post-traumatic stress and you want to find a mindfulness or type program to help them, you can do that. If that's where your juice is, if it's about gardens in the schools, you can go and find out where they're doing it. And just if everybody just takes their little passion and lives their own life and expresses that, we'll have thousands of people around the country making this happen, and we'll start ramping up this movement to really make some significant change. And I think the country's really ready for it.
Brilliant. Well, Congressman Ryan, thank you for all that you do, these wonderful texts, and for also spending the time with us today. This has been helpful and inspirational, so I deeply appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Keep up the great work.
Well, thank you again, and listeners and viewers, again, our delightful guest today is Congressman Tim Ryan. Definitely check him and his new books out online, and remember, stay sane.